Good evening. This is a summary, which I'll try to not tell stories. I'll try to be very focused on this. I'm talking about your readings and your reactions to the first four chapters in Pipher, and a lot of good stuff. Actually, more content and substance comes from your own interactions, your discussion, than anything Banks has to say or I have to say. All of you have created at one time or another, someone in your school, solutions to help migrants. Part of it is interesting is that I find when you talk about, for instance, working with students, special education students, or other students that may have, maybe behavior, or maybe they've been in trouble with the police or something like that, or have bad social behavior. A lot of your solutions there have value and can be applied in some way to working with migrants or refugees, ESL students, etc. So I actually went through and cut and pieced, and I'm talking detailed reading and analysis of all of your work here. This one I cut down. This one I printed everything out and started slicing out as much as I could to get to the essence. I'm only at 25 pages for the section 2 class. I'm going to be sharing this video and some of this stuff with all of you as much as I can. Couple things, something John David Siebold said is that you need to be careful with your time, because all of you get really excited on here and you tell all the wonderful things you want to do. Now, don't kill yourselves. You can only do so much, and you have to take care of your own family. So if you're called to help, of course you do it. You want to think carefully about how you help families and students and how you communicate, because you have to be aware of their culture. They may be embarrassed if the teacher buys them gifts. So you have to go through, you have to know about their culture. You can't just go over and give people money. You have to look at that. Find out. One of the things I saw in here was Mikasa, Sukasa, I think, and I forgot who said that. I'll come to it in a minute. But your program there is great because it emphasizes getting pairing up families that are have some experience, that do speak the language. The same with kids in the classroom. Sometimes you get a buddy, but make sure the buddy speaks the same language, but has been there and adjusted better. And so they have an opportunity to talk to someone. So if you have a kid from Syria, find another kid from Syria or another Arabic speaking kid who could be his buddy, because they need the intimacy of the language so they know what's going on. They'll trust them to give them information. You have to be careful who you pick, but you want to be careful, you want things. Really interesting little piece in here. John Lindblad, in my second section, he's in Kuwait right now, serving our country, and he was talking about how people live over there, and had a really good reflection about that. He says, I and others with me here in Kuwait live in sheds. They look like a shipping container with iron support beams and electrical wiring exposed. The people here are living like the women in the second chapter. They are saving or sending money to their families where they are from. And people do that in Kuwait. Country of Kuwait has a lot of migrant workers. So, he sees things like that, and people save their money and send it back home because that's why they're working in Kuwait. If you didn't know that, Saudi Arabia has been in the paper for things unrelated to migrants in their country, but that's also an issue, how they treat them. But people go to places and they earn money. A lot of Filipinos go to the Middle East. Sometimes a lot of abuse is there, and abuse is here too in other countries. Anytime you're at the bottom of the work barrel, then you don't have a lot of rights, and it's very much a struggle. But anyhow, he observed this in Kuwait, and it applies here. It applies anywhere people are working. So I want to thank you, John, for that. I wanted to find that Mikasa Sukasa program, and I'll find it eventually. I know I saw it somewhere. Just about the time I get ready to talk, I can't find it. But oh, here it is. Jill Harpin. No, Harpin now. You mentioned that they have a program. They pair a legacy family with a new family to share some family times and meals. This is the pairing up of families. This is a good little solution. So what I'm talking here is a little bit ideals, but a lot of practical stuff. And rather than have you go through everything, I'm going to try to make a list of it. Jennifer mentioned money management skills. I had written down from, she's in the second class, April in the first class had written about community involvement, getting Trias Bank to teach banking skills, the YMCA and other people to give practical advice on living in the community, managing your money, buying a car. You remember Pipher had to work with that. Show parents how to find or access resources. You realize you as a teacher can't do all this. Hopefully your school counselor or somebody in the community that you can refer them to will be helpful. So you kind of have to build a machine here. You have to work with other people because you can't build this network and be the network yourself. Show parents how to get counseling, where to get clothes, Goodwill, discount. I'm not a big fan of Goodwill because there's some issues with their system. Food, translators, instead of using the little kids. You can't take a 9-year-old to do a bank loan or to go in for a payday loan. That's just asking for disaster. A lot of people mention media misleading people, kids getting on their phones. Kids can get on phones and buy things, and the parents may have a credit card, and the kid may know more about getting the credit card but not realize what they're getting their parents involved with. There's nothing like getting threatened with being, fraud and stuff. And you're very vulnerable when even if you're a legal refugee and you're here, you are nervous because you don't like being threatened by letters. In other countries, when people threaten you, it's more than just a letter, and you don't have the legal system to help you. Right at the beginning of this second class section, Nolan brought this up, and so did somebody who talked to Nolan. I accidentally cut their name out when I was writing. Oh, Colleen, I think. Maybe not. I don't know. But it was about conversing with your students, not doing just question and answer sessions. You need to have conversations. So you have to, even if you don't have home visits and you have to use a translator, you need to have a comfortable place to have a conversation. And you have to have more than one, because the first conversation, people are literally a little nervous. They don't know what you might be up to. So you want to give them a chance to get used to you and get comfortable. Colleen mentioned helping people be good parents, working with the Karen, Karen, people from Myanmar, the refugees. There are quite a number in Lincoln and Omaha and other parts of the country, Southeast Asian. There's a lot to learn about them because they're not Cambodians and they're not Thai and they're not Buddhists, and probably not Buddhists. I think I'm right on that. I wanted to mention this because she mentioned about parenting. There may be traditions from the home country that may be mistaken for child abuse. I remember in Southeast Asia, some people believe in using coins and pressing them against a kid's back to get rid of, it could be a cold or a bad back, but it's probably something like a fever or something. And I remember that there was a case several years ago where people saw these strange marks on their back and called the Child Protection Services, and the kids were taken away, and people didn't know what these marks were. They thought maybe they were being hit, or they couldn't tell because they were new, and they were actually, people take coins and rub them on their back because they think this will make you feel better. And you've heard things like that, the old deal of using a candle and to clean the earwax out of your ear. Can you imagine doing that in another country and someone sees you doing that? They think you're burning the kid. So you knowledge of culture and really going on the internet to read about it and conversing and getting people that can explain you need to look into these before you ring the bell and accuse somebody of something. Of course, you have to turn them in. I mean, you can't just ignore anything you're suspicious about, but it'd be good if you did this research in advance so you had something there to help the authorities with. They may not know anything about it. Casey mentioned, talking about things, and I saw several people mention this in the first class, talking to kids about how was your weekend? What were some fun things you did? Nothing formal, just did you sleep in? Which shows did you watch Saturday night, et cetera, et cetera. I think that was so interesting. I mean, you have to develop a relationship. You're not just teaching. You're not delivering some material to them. Virtual field trips. This was mentioned by Jill. Mentioned this, that virtual field trips would be really useful. I like the idea of that because you can't go and take people everywhere. But I saw a video once. Lexington had it, and it was a video they would take out on a VHS, and they'd play it, and then somebody would be there to translate, or I don't even think they had subtitles, but they would help people at the meatpacking plant. They'd go out there because that's where the parents work, and they would show these videos, and they'd say, "This is how you sign up your kid for school." Or, you could develop those. Think how interesting that'd be. Develop those for signing up for classes, going to the dentist. I mean, think about all the fun. You could have students in high school do projects like that. I'm about ready to sneeze. Just ignore it. I'll stay away from the screen. Oh, my gosh. You can bless me, but I won't hear it. Interpreters are very useful. I remember somebody said that you feel like you're still missing something with interpreters because obviously if you can't speak the language, you have to use interpreters, but it's good to get long-term interpreters that can work with you and know what you're looking for. People of integrity, but who are very knowledgeable of that particular culture. Do not use children in the family to interpret, because I've seen that where someone from another family, they used their kid in high school and then they gave out information about the other family's child being in trouble and not flunking out and stuff. And that's not even legal. You're not supposed to share information. So you have to have an outsider. Okay. Again, the internet, the technology comes up. Haley mentioned this. Talks about somebody got in trouble. She mentioned something interesting. Somebody got chewed out during their stay because their Spanish wasn't very good. You're supposed to speak English on campus for security issues. And I wrote, what the heck? I didn't write that, but something like that. And I thought, sometimes when you're dealing with security people, if they don't know much about the culture, they're not given much leeway there. Okay. And we're not going to bash security people. They're doing their job. So if there's some problem, then people need to do the training. Mentioning that there is a professional development for cultural awareness. Does your school do that? Are you interested in that? I can do things like that myself. I usually don't go out and do presentations, but I used to. So, or, making a video or getting professional stuff. I like stuff that's personalized for the school. I don't like some commercial thing that you send out and, half of it deals with situations you don't deal with. Again, I see a mention of internet fraud in here. That Jen brought that up. That was the one that brought it up. Haley brought up the security issue. Teaching social skills, and this was a big one. That you may have students, and I've heard of cases like this, and I know it's not common, but it can happen, where you have a lot of kids that the English they learned is not the English they should be using at school or in any social situation. What do you do with that if half the words they know are cursing? A lot of people, unfortunately, think it's funny to teach kids that, so they get in trouble. And So take that with a grain of salt. You know, if they know language, maybe they only know a little bit and it's not the good English, or for that matter, the good Spanish, because I know people that like to learn bad Spanish when they're learning Spanish. They want to be naughty, you know how that is. A good one mentioned in here by Travis. I think it was Travis, and some of you also mentioned kids don't understand reserving computer time or getting in line and getting on a schedule, because the idea of reserving time in the future is peculiar. The whole concept of time can be very peculiar. So you have to watch for that, because if people don't have experience with, say, technology and with, getting in line, you have to wait. I remember watching a show. It was about how Americans are considered very rude in England, because instead of forming a line, they tend to just cluster around in a big circle around wherever the entrance is to where the train is. And so they don't form a queue, as they call it, and they don't queue up with the Q word, Q letter. And so because they don't queue up, the British are very upset with Americans. So Americans don't even know how to line up. Like, how ignorant are they? So that does not impress them. Obviously, using bad language takes a lot of time to unlearn. It's interesting because you can get kids, the language is so bad, you sometimes just go on, try to work with it. You can't turn them into the principal, because you have to work with what you've got. Hope you never run into that. A lot of people in both classes, and this is in the second class, but it went in both, talked about how either blissfully innocent Americans are, how privileged we are. I don't like to use the term white privilege. Of course it exists, but privilege can be with any group. It's not just a white thing. It just happens to be that in particular situations in the United States. If you're in Saudi Arabia, the Saudis, the top people, the Saudis, they have privilege. The rich have privileges. Professional white-collar people have privileges that blue-collar people may not have. I don't mean to say there isn't privilege or to water it down, but it exists. I just find that usually when you start talking about, oh, you're privileged and these people are not, it usually backfires. Because then people get angry because they say, look, I work for everything I do. I didn't get a special privilege. No, you didn't get the privilege because you took it away from somebody else. You just happen to be in a better situation. If you get stopped by the police, you're not afraid of the police. This is true in many countries. A lot of minorities, or maybe individuals with special needs or something, they may, when they run into an unexpected situation, they either know from experiences of people like them that, oh my gosh, this might go very badly. And you hear this all the time about, that lady in Tennessee that called an African-American man was going to his apartment. This lady was somehow working for the company there, and she didn't want to hear about that he had an apartment there. She kept following him and trying to threaten him. And of course, she got fired, and she ended up on a video, which is probably going to make it tough to get a job. But people get the idea, if they see someone that looks different than what they're used to, they think this can't be. There was a guy who was babysitting 3 white kids, and he's African American. He was actually tutoring them in math, and he picked them up, and somebody turned him in. The police come over to his house like he had kidnapped them. I remember after 9/11, anyone speaking Arabic got turned into the police because people thought, well, they must be terrorists. Immediately, because that event, then suddenly every Arab is bad. I heard the most bizarre stories over in Lexington. People tell me strange stories of very secretive, rich Arab men that were being arrested, and we kept them in the jail and we don't know what to do with them. These stories were lies. It's amazing what human beings will believe. Of course, I sat at home at night, don't ever tell this, and I'm forced to watch shows about UFOs and ghosts and things like that. And I used to kind of like them, but being forced to watch them endlessly with the same thing rerun over slightly differently, and they claim it's a new show. Yeah. All right, I'm not criticizing anybody in my house. That's all I'm saying. I don't like watching them. Okay. Um, when people learn a new culture, they have to learn everything. I'd mentioned the one about the coins and parenting, and social skills, and things like that. Trying to see on this second one. Yeah, we I like the one that Jennifer had put in here, talking to Jacob. Says there's something that we always preach and expect, but now teachers are wearing shirts at school say be kind regularly, and then talking to your students about how it looks and what it means. That you as teachers, you're cultural brokers, but you're role models, but role models not in the sense that you go out and vote and do things like that, because kids probably don't ever see you do that. They see how you react to people, how you look at people, the tone of your voice. Your if you're firm and disciplined but respectful to the person who had the violation, that's fine. But you cannot, rip people. You can't get angry. I find that with my dealings with international students, anger is not something you ever want to express. Um, it causes what's called a loss of face. I've seen it with Asian students where the teacher, and this is at Oklahoma State years ago, and he just jumped on the guy and just ripped him, the American graduate assistant, criticized him, with an angry tone. Well, this went on for about 30 seconds. The student went and dropped the class. He never saw him again. And I said, you can't express anger. I mean, I can tell by this. You know how it is. Cross words can be remembered forever. I remember them, and I carry a grudge. So if somebody mistreats me, I don't forget it. Even if they try to be nice. Now, if they're a friend, it's one thing. But if I don't see this person very much, I don't go about saying, "Oh well, they just had a bad day." I'm not Mr. Nice Guy like you see here. I remember that, and so okay. I love this professional. Elizabeth's the one who brought up the professional development. You and I think Emily in the other course, my other Emily with the IE, talked about teaching culture and art and going to museums or going to productions or going to the opera or to a play. And I'm talking not obviously you do it for all students, but I'm talking those are very important things. And it'd be even better if you could go to an event that is centered on the culture. I know Lexington would have all kinds of dance presentations or other activities in which Hispanic culture or some aspect of Hispanic culture would be highlighted in the music. We did a thing where when I was in college over here, we brought over African, I think from Ghana. There's a group from Omaha. Can't think of them. Some of you might know this group, but they do a lot of drums, and it's not so much guitar, but they do a lot of drums, and they talk about African music and dancing and stuff. And this group many years ago got a grant, brought them over to Lexington, and also had them do a presentation up here. Really interesting because it forced people to dance. And if you can imagine if you had to get up and dance in front of your students, wow, that's going to get you kind of uptight. Of course, I studied disco back in the 70s, so I'm very adept at adjusting to dance. Okay, I even have the leisure suit, so just wait. I'll wear that online. I don't want to see it put on YouTube forever. I like the one that was a comment that I think Haley made it. It was talking about teach students to care for other teachers. And it was somebody, is it Haley or the one right before? I can't always tell. But it was about some teacher having a difficult time, or a coach. I think maybe it was a coach. And that the students actually did things to make the coach feel better, wrote a little, it wasn't a get well card. Maybe it was, I don't know. But it was something to show that the students cared and were compassionate and empathetic toward the teacher. And that's a great thing because that's obviously a multi-way street. not only that you care for your students, but you must allow them to be merciful to you and to be kind to you. It'll do wonders for you, and it'll do wonders for those students, because to have some child come up and say they're concerned about you, it's one of the most touching things I can ever imagine. I mean, it's pure and it's true and it's good. Okay, I know I'm talking a lot and I'm trying to get through things. I already mentioned John's comment about Q8. A lot of you, Tessa mentioned this. She's in my second class. They may not have a lot of diversity, but you may have students with special needs. So just this week, we learned you're going to get a third grade student with Down syndrome. And so they visited with the mother to help with the transition. And so, of course, how do you go about doing this? Now, I'm not an expert on this, but it's an aspect of our culture, how we deal with those that are different from us in some way. It's not just physical differences. It may be learning abilities. It may be certain conditions. It may be illness. There was one in here about a little boy that has diabetes and has to get shots in class. How do you explain that to the students? Because they're going to be curious. He's going to get an injection, and you want kids to know things and be able to deal with them rather than to get, not understand. So I remember the one we discussed before about Jehovah's Witness kids being in class and not able to take the Pledge of Allegiance or do something or participate in songs, and how you explored that. You didn't hide it. My school, we hid it back in the 60s, oh, why is Beth like that? Well, I don't know. They're strange people. That's what we knew. And so I always thought of this girl, Beth, as being different. And of course, she's different, but I mean different in a bad way. Like, maybe they're not loyal to the country. Carrie Ehlers, you guys mentioned about having a food pantry. Several of you mentioned this. I think in the first part we did this. And so having access in the school food pantry also comes up with Josh Schreiner brought about this. And the idea of having activity, and that can be a lot of kids at school, not just migrant kids. Again, you want to know about the rules about charity. Erica, I like that. You mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird. Literature is a great way to talk about being a cultural broker. I don't know if you'd have to introduce that term. You just want to act that way. The kids don't need to know the term culture broker. I find sometimes people get weird when they hear some term. They say, what is that supposed to be? Multicultural? So you just do good things. How many people can't attack actions very well? I'm going to outreach to families. April had mentioned several in the first class. I think I talked about those. Michelle Dean, I think, in the first class, she mentioned about the stages of adjusting and the psychology, which you can do a little research, the psychology of dealing with students and their families as they adjust, because there's the grief of losing your country. Like you said, we're blissful. We're sitting in our little safe place wherever we are, and we feel pretty comfy, and we think the whole world's built around us. But the whole world's unstable. Things change. We haven't had, unless you have a tornado hit or something, you still have your area and your people, you have to rebuild. Most people can psychologically get through that. But if you were to lose your language, lose your parents, lose family, have illnesses, maybe have immigration threatening to go after you, depending on your situation, or if you've broken a rule, or if if your status is negative to begin with. So how do you adjust to all that? And so that's why I like those books last week. Any more books you can get so kids can see themselves in the books, that makes a difference. So I'm talking about multicultural, not as necessarily social action for you to change society. But I wrote something down, and I want you to remember it. I have two things, actually. But the one thing I wrote, and I remember somebody saying about heroes, and I wrote down, you're teaching your students to be heroes to someone in the future. That's my quote. You're creating the heroes of tomorrow. They may be heroes to you. They may be heroes to someone else down the line. They say pay it forward, that expression. Um, if you teach compassion and you teach and you educate so the kids can read and they have the ability to help others, whether it's teaching banking or helping with adjustments or emotional situations. I read some really tough ones in here. If some of you may have read them, where people are trying to, they're here documented, but because of certain situations, maybe their husband has lost his job, or the husband has been put on parole by immigration, and the wife is legally here, but the wife doesn't get this document from the IRS. She's going to lose her scholarship, and then they won't have money coming in, and they're facing horrible situations. And that's what's going to affect your kids. It's not going to affect your kids as much that they forgot their homework, is that they don't have any place to put their homework, or that someone's being abusive at home, or that they're just afraid, deep anxiety. So the whole world of psychological impact of being down and being threatened by people or threatened by the system or unable to understand what's going on, all of this is very difficult. As Emily in the first class said, you can't separating people from culture. Well, you can't. Language is culture. People are culture. People don't exist unless they have a context. Otherwise, it's madness. You have to know what's real. So what Michelle Dean said here about, she also said, be an example. That's always great for your other kids in the class. So to teach them when they're role models, they're not just honoring the system and being good kids, but they're helping others. And so I think if you connect it to other people, it makes, what I wrote, as a teacher, your true job is to nurture future heroes. Oh, and I want to mention one other thing. To respect another culture, you have to find beauty in it. So when I look at Arabic, I love the writing, the calligraphy. I like their architecture. I like many of the sayings in Arabic. I like the clothing, African culture. I like the hats the men wear. I know that's shallow, but I like the use of dance for creating a fabric in the society. That's why I like when Emily did her entry and talked about music, and also Elizabeth in the other class. Music is huge. She said Emily said we took our kids to see Harold and the Purple Crayon and Stella Luna, and the kids loved it. This is culture. The higher culture people silly think that makes a difference. The family deal, Amanda Joy mentioned that. The whole issue of family time, Kayla mentioned that in the first class. That's extraordinary, because your kids are your family, You can't really teach kids and not be attached to them. And frankly, teaching this class, I love reading this stuff. How people say they hate papers? And I know I got some papers yours I got to read. It takes time, but the act of reading these documents, I don't really like I like doing this instead of responding one-on-one with you, because I want to share what I say to one person with everybody. So I'd rather you listen to me rant for about 50 minutes than anything else. But I hope I'm really pleased, genuinely touched by the way you respond to each other in here. This is good stuff. I almost regret not having you do a journal this week, but I thought I'd give you some time off because you've been doing some papers, and so I'm going to try to keep more to journaling, or the whatever I call these, discussion posts, because they tell little stories here, and even when you live in a place that's you think is not diverse, there's always diversity there. It may not be the kind of diversity like having a bunch of Danes living in your town. They all melted in with the Swedes about 80 years ago. And now you have to go back in time to talk about the diversity, but it's still there. The little tidbits of the leftovers from grandma's recipes, great grandma's long gone. Their food and some of their blankets, their quilts are there. So these things persist over time. They don't just disappear. They just become part of the culture and they become what you are. Okay. All right. I have kind of a cold, but I'm feeling okay, but I'm a little bushed. So I will hope you read this and hope I covered enough. You do what you can do and you can't do more. Now I'm going to have you continue reading and finish Pipher. I think most of you already read it all. I'm not giving a test over it. What I'm looking for is its impact on you. There'll be some chapters that won't speak to you very well. Especially the one I know most people didn't comment, the one with a girl from Southeast Asia. I thought she was Vietnamese, but I have to go back. I've read it so many times I can't keep all the characters straight. But then she talks about Americans just care about time and money. And that caused somebody to think, well, maybe that's true. Well, it's true with some people, and so true in other countries too. But never try to generalize too much and say people are all one way in one place or they're all bad. Because that's usually when you go to war with people or when you have hatred, you try to dehumanize them. You say, oh, they're all alike. They're all the same, And so I'll bid you a good night. I hope this has been helpful. And I will ask you to read the rest of Pipher, and then I'll put in a discussion for next week. Halloween coming up. I'm thinking about my costume. I'm not much to dress up in weird stuff, so I'll think of something. Be sure and send me an email if you have any questions. I'll be responding to all your interviews and your culture papers, which are now on my dock, which I will live with all week long. So I will email my responses to you on those. I will not share those with the group. And I'm trying to keep the grades up. I don't see anybody doing anything less than an A, and people are working ahead. Some people are having babies. And I'm waiting on a grandchild here in the next 2 weeks. So if you don't see me on a weekend, I'll just tell you I had a baby. You know what that's like. Thank you. Bye. I can't end it. Oh, there it is. Okay.